All right, so our game is now moving el horizontal, but it needs to do a couple of other things as well. For one, it's not jumping, so it would be nice if we could make it jump. So attached to that same script, I'm going to open it back up again. I don't remember closing it out, but I must have somehow. We're going to go ahead and make a couple of other adjustments. So we have currently that the velocity will equal basically the input, which goes from -1 to 0 to 1. So if we don't push anything, it's 0, so it makes the player speed times the player speed, which will be 0, and so it doesn't move at all. But to do the jump, we want it to happen when we press the space key, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I just got to toggle word wrap again. So after this, we're going to go ahead and add an if statement. So we're going to say if the input dot get axis, and we're going to look for horizontal, or not horizontal, I'm putting horizontal, sorry, jump, get axis jump is greater than 0, we're going to go ahead and apply a force to it. So instead of using velocity, which is the speed that it's moving, we're actually going to add like a bop, like a force. Okay, so we're going to apply that again to our player RB2D, and we're going to do dot add force, and the force we're going to add is now it needs a couple of things. If you look here, it needs a vector 2 and then the force. Okay, so for that we are going to apply this. We're going to say we want to go upward, so this is kind of like a cheat, if you will. It's not really a cheat, but it's a short way of kind of putting it. So we're just going to say transform up. That just represents the up axis, and then we want to go up times the player jump strength that we made earlier. Okay, so it's going to go upward at the jump strength. Okay, so we'll save that, Control S, go back here. We're going to click on player. Currently my jump strength, come on player, show me your, okay, we have to wait for it to update. Every time you click back on there, because it has to reload the script, it takes a second. So we're going to go to our player jump strength, and let's do like 50. It takes a bit more force to get the jump to work, because it has to fight against gravity. So if I hit spacebar, there you go, see? Only problem is, and you may have noticed, is that when I'm holding spacebar, he just keeps going up. There's nothing to tell him that he can't keep going up while we press spacebar. So that basically means that he can jump in the air, which is cool because we can kind of do like a flying Flappy Bird game, but that's obviously not the best case scenario. So what would be nicer is if instead we had something to control our of whether we're touching the ground or not, right? So we need a way to say, hey, are we touching the ground? So we can do this a couple different ways, and we're actually going to change this in the future, but for now, the simplest way to do it is actually just to make an object that will be like a ground check. So we're going to create another empty, okay, and we'll just call this ground check, and I'm going to parent this to the player as well, okay, and I want to zero it out. So we'll go like this, 0, 0. So now it's right at the center of our player object here. And then what I want to do is I'm going to add a component, physics 2D, box collider 2D. Okay, and then we're going to edit the collider, and this is actually going to represent the spot that tests for us hitting the ground. So I'm going to go a little bit lower, go like this, and actually we'll leave it like that. Okay, and then I'll hit like this. What's important is this. Right now, when this hits the ground, this is the rigid body. So this is the thing that collides. So it has to go past this square. So you can see our square, this one that's going to test, is actually underneath it. It has to go past that, otherwise it'll never penetrate the ground. Okay? So this is actually probably even a little bit too big. Let me just edit collider. Let's bring it up a little bit. Okay. but it has to go past it, okay? Now, the other thing we need to do is that this is now a collider. So what's going to happen is that when this falls, it's actually just going to collide with this and slide up. We actually don't want it to be a collider. These boss colliders can do one of two things. They can either be a physical object that you can bump against, or it can be a trigger. Now, if it's a trigger, what that means is that you can write a special bit of code that will run when this is triggered, okay? And that's what we're going to do. We're going to make a piece of code that's going to run when this thing is touching the ground, okay? That's the goal. All right. So we're going to make a new script. So in here, right-click, create, C# script, and we're going to call this the ground check script. So this is going to check our ground, and we will open it up. Wondrous. Okay. So here's what we need to do. We are going to go ahead and we actually do not need this update. I'm going to actually delete these comments. I don't really need those. We will need the start. I'm going to leave it there for now, but we're not going to put anything in there quite yet. And what we're going to do is let's make a variable above here, and we're just going to call it public, and we will call it ground. Public, and it's going to be a bool. So a bool is a true or false object. So like we had floats before, there's ints, there's bools, there's other sorts of vectors, there's different kinds of variables. This one holds true or false, so it's either true or it's false, okay? Now what we're going to do is instead of update here, we need another function, but instead of update, it's going to be on trigger enter 2D, okay? So just like this will run on the first frame and update will run on every rendered frame, this is a pre-made function that runs at a very specific time, and on trigger enter 2D, that one, specifically what it does is it will run when something enters the trigger, okay? Now, we don't want this trigger to run, we want to test what it's hitting, okay? Because we don't want it to just say, oh, something got hit, it should be able to jump. Because if you look right now, this thing is penetrating player, right? See, they're right on top of each other. So we only want it to run when this is running. So we need to test what we are hitting, okay? So what we're going to do is that when this does get triggered, we are going to store the collider 2D, okay, of the object that we hit as COL. So basically whatever this trigger hits, it's going to store the collider of the object that it hits as a COL, okay? Now, what I need to do is this. I need to test multiple objects and whether they are, I need to have a way of saying, oh, did you hit the platform? The problem is that let's say I have this platform and I could test its name, okay? So let's say I duplicate it and I put another one. Oh, sorry, I duplicated it. Hang on a second. And I put another one over here. Well, if you look, this one's platform whatever, right? And I might have different kinds of platforms. They all have different names. So I need to do is have a way of sort of grouping them, but not as a group, but just as a way of like tagging them, if you will. So what I'm going to do is with this selected, you can see that there's this thing called tag. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a tag to this. And so you click on that, and then we click plus, and we're just going to call it ground, and hit enter. Now, that created a new tag, but you'll see it didn't actually add it yet. But now it's one of the options. So now I click on that, and now this officially has this tag, which is on the wrong object. I didn't want it on that. Sorry, that should be untagged. It's meant to be on the platform. Sorry, the platformer, that one I want to have ground. It doesn't matter where I put it on, as long as it still says untagged there. Okay, good. So that one says ground. So now I can have all sorts of different objects, and as long as they have ground on them, it will say, I can test whether the object I'm hitting is ground, and say, yeah, that's ground. You're allowed to jump, okay? So let's go back here. So now what we're going to do is say, okay, what we're going to hit, whenever we hit something, this will run. It's going to store the thing it hits as this variable. It's going to store the collider of the thing it hits as a COL. That's the variable name. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to test what we're hitting. So we're going to say if col.tag, if the tag of the collider that we hit is equal, means if the name is ground, then you're going to run this. And we're just going to say ground is going to be equal, we're going to give it the value of true. Okay? And let's go ahead and up here, let's just do ground equals false. We'll give it an initial value. So it'll start off as false. So basically, if it enters, when the thing hits something, and if the thing it hits, if its tag is ground, it's going to make ground equal true. Okay? And that'll work, but that'll only turn on. We need a way to also turn it off. So we're going to add another one of these. And it's actually easy. It's just to copy this whole thing. I'm going to grab this, Control C, Control V. And let me just, like that. And instead of onTrigger enter 2D, I want onTrigger exit 2D. And basically, if something exits its trigger, if the thing that exits its trigger is ground, we're going to set it back. We're going to set ground back down to false. Great. Now this will work, but I have had a weird issue where it gets confused. So you actually have to add another one, and I'm going to put this one in between. We need to add another one that is onTrigger onTrigger stay. So while it is in there, we also want it to stay as true. Okay, so when it enters it, it's true. While it's inside it, it's true. But then when it exits, sets it back to false. Okay, so let's just save this, Control S, and let's just see if it's working. Okay, it's not currently doing anything. We're just going to see if the if that's working. Okay. Okay, so on the ground check, we need to apply that script that we just put. So I'm going to take the ground check. We'll drop it over here. There it is. You can see how it's off? That's on. So that's how we'll know. I'm going to hit play. Now watch this. And turned on. And when I jump, turns off. On, off. But it's not actually controlling it in any way, right? There's nothing stopping it. I just want to make sure that we're detecting the ground. So what I actually need to do is I need this to tell it, I need to, in this script, say, if we're touching the ground, go ahead and jump. See how we have, if you press the button, jump. If it's greater than 0, meaning you're pushing the button, go ahead and jump. I need to say, if it's greater than 0 and you're on the ground, okay? So the way we're going to do that is this. We're going to go up here, and we're going to do something sort of similar. I'm going to add another variable. We'll call it public bool ground, okay? Now, this actually won't work. This actually will throw an error when I bring it in because you cannot have two scripts with the same public variable. They'll collide. See how this one has it and this one has it? This is not cool, okay? So I'm actually, and this one too, I'm going to go ahead and set it initially equal to false. Okay. So what I need to do is actually remove, oops, not like that. I need to remove this one here. And what I want to do is that instead of telling it public ground equals true, in here, I want it to actually change this one's ground to true and false, okay? So what we're going to need to do is have a way of accessing that. So this is how we're going to go about doing it. We're going to go up here, and we're going to make a variable that's going to hold this script, okay? So we are going to make a public variable, public, and the type is player controller script, and we'll just call it player controller script, but lowercase this time, player controller script. All right, so you might be like, how is this a variable type? If you remember right here, remember we took this rigid body, right? And we're like, oh, it's this right here. Just like we can grab a box collider, or like we grab the rigid body, this is just another component that we can grab a hold of, and that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to take that component. This will hold the player controller script. Now I actually need to assign it to this variable we just made. Okay, so we're going to do lowercase player controller script. We're going to give it the value, and now I need to be able to grab that player controller script. The player controller script is attached to this. So basically, I can't put just get component player controller script like we did when we did the rigid body here. See how we did get component? Because this will get the component of the rigid body that this script is attached to. Ground check doesn't have that. The script is attached to this guy. It's not attached to ground check. So I have to get the component in the parent, and that's what we're going to do. So in here, we're going to do player controller script, and it's going to be get component in parent, and the component I want to get is the player controller script, like so. Okay. Now, what we can do is that player controller script, that has functions and properties. That has things that it can do and things that we can change about it. And one of its properties is this bool, right? This ground. So what I'm going to do is in here, instead of just putting ground true, it's going to be player controller script dot ground is true, because dot ground is inside a player controller script. Okay? I know this is all very confusing. We're going to discuss this in more depth later on, actually next class. I'm just going to copy it and paste it here, and then we're going to paste it here. But this one we're going to put as false. So instead of it setting a ground variable here that we had in this variable false, we're actually setting the variable false, the ground false and true on this one. So we connect to it right here. We connect to it right here. We make the variable to hold it here. We put that specific player controller script into this variable, and then in that variable we go ahead and we turn the ground true and false. Okay, and then we'll just save that. And you're also gonna need, I don't think I saved this one. Save this one, and then click back in here. We wait to see if there's any errors. I do often get errors myself. And looks like we're good. Let's hit play. And boom, and I can jump. And there you go. So if we look, let me see, player controller script. Okay. So you see, it is turning off, but see I can still jump? That's because we're not making it say that we can't jump. So we actually I forgot about that. We got to go here, and in player controller script, right here we say if you press jump, go ahead and run this. We're going to say if you press jump and, so 2 ampersands, and ground. Now, we don't have to say and ground is true, because ground itself is a Boolean. It's either true or false. So if ground is false, this won't be able to run. And if ground is true, it will. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and save that. So now you have to press jump, and ground has to be true. So I'll save that. I'll go back in here, and it should now work. As soon as this pops open, play. And now when we jump, right, you can see, yay! And I can adjust the jump strength here, and if I need to, okay? And what we can do from there is, if you want, you can grab this, and we'll Control D to have multiple platforms. Control D. Like that. And then we can play, and they all have that same ground tag, so it'll work on all of them. As long as the object itself has the ground tag, and you can see we've made a kind of crummy game. Woo, it's so exciting. Okay, and that's sort of the lump sum of it. Alright, yeah, so get that done. When you're done, just save this, Control S. Then what you want to do, we can close out of this because we did what we needed to there. You're going to want to take this folder, just zip it, send to compressed zip folder, and then just submit that on Blackboard. And that should be it. So good luck.